Madam Chair, we are live. Madam Chair, we are live.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee for December 16th, 2020. I'd like to welcome alternate Director McNeil. Welcome for today's meeting. And also for first meeting, Director Martman. Thank you so much for joining us and congratulations on your win. And we would like to first and secondly, but not firstly, is to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. And with that, I would like to move approval of the agenda, please. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And now we move to the adoption of the minutes. M1, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item M1, the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 2nd, 2020 be adopted.
It's been moved, seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. M2, Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 2nd, 2020 be adopted.
Been moved, second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you so much. Any business arising from the minutes, Ms. Harrison?
There is none.
Okay. Do we have any public input, Ms. Harrison?
As of now, no, we do not, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. No delegations, no correspondence. We turn now to information. And IN1, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. IN1 contains two sets of minutes. The first set is from Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes of November 19th, 2020. And number two is the Electoral Area E, Cowichan Station, Satlam, Glenora Advisory Planning Commission meeting minutes of November 10th, 2020. And those are for information, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. This is for information, but are there any questions on that? Seeing none. Oh, Director Morrison, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the recommendations that came out of I think it was the Area D minutes, and it's in regards to item 1, and it's a rezoning RZ 18D01. And I'm just wondering, do we know if staff were in attendance at this meeting? Because I'm looking at a couple of the recommendations subject to the approval of the following, and I don't know how we can possibly deliver on bullet 1 and bullet 3. So I'm just curious as to how that and how we might possibly carry out those recommendations from our APC. Are staff able to answer that?
Are you speaking to the roundabout Ministry of Transportation information in there?
Yes. Yeah. It's around. Does it say roundabout traffic improvements and ensuring a daycare on one of the lots? So I know we can ensure that be a permitted use, but I'm wondering how we go beyond that. So is there any staff are able to? I'd like some explanation as to how we're going to implement recommendations from an APC like that.
Thank you. I have Mr. Limshu on, but I was also attending that meeting with 2 staff members as well. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say that, yes, for these virtual APC meetings, staff have been attending them. In fact, staff has been assisting in coordinating the meetings. Unfortunately, this is one of the few meetings that I was not able to attend, but I am quite aware of the rezoning application that's been put on the table. Certainly the committees through discussions able to make recommendations to the EAC and ultimately to the board with respect to what they would like to see. And it's really up to staff to work with the applicant to see whether or not those items that are being recommended can actually be fulfilled. So I'll just leave it at that. Not sure that answers your question, but
Thank you
That's
so
enough.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're moving on now to reports. So, Ms. Harrison, I turn to you for R1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R1 is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding application number COV 20B01 for 360 Stebbings Road, and the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that covenant number EX025562, registered on title for 360 Stebbings Road, PID 026-226-448, be discharged.
Has it been moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Morrison? Is there a discussion? Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to R2, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R2 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number COV 20H01 for 4760 Brenton Page Road, PID 027772900, and the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that covenant CA 207333 5/CA 2073336, registered on title for 4760 Brenton Page Road for PID 027772900, be discharged.
Okay, Director Martman?
I was moving that recommendation.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Director Martman.
I'd just like to, through the chair to staff, I just want to clarify that the discharge of this covenant is based on a lapse of time, not that it's not been approved or rejected.
Mr. Limshu?
Madam Chair, through to Director Martman. That's correct. The discharge, the building permit application basically expired. And through the wording of the covenant, it does allow for the covenant to be removed. The long and short of it is that the proposed building did not go ahead. And so there is no need for the covenant to be on title.
Okay, that's sufficient. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Moving on now to R3, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R3 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DVP 20D05 1535 Robson Lane for PID 00397-903, and there is a recommendation before you. The recommendation reads that it be recommended to the board that development variance permit number DVP 20D05 for 1535 Robson Lane, PID 00397-903 be issued.
Okay, I have Director Morrison. Were you moving that?
Moving that for the chair, yes.
Okay, and so it's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions to staff? Director Martman, go ahead, please.
Just through the chair to staff, I was just wondering if there's a rationale for the location for that for that building, that it couldn't be moved a little bit forward to be within the setbacks.
Mr. Limshu?
Through the chair, the as outlined in the staff report, the premise behind this particular site, it's located in the it's subject to the agricultural development permit area, and so the principle behind the agricultural development permit area is to basically protect as much usable ag land as we can. So in this case, the applicants are proposing to put the accessory building in a location that is in close proximity with the existing buildings, so that the buildings are not spread out throughout the site. Because once you start spreading buildings out throughout the site, it minimizes the amount of usable land for agricultural purposes. In this case, the applicant did talk to their neighbors, and certainly. As you can see, there was no correspondence from the neighbors expressing concern or opposition to the application. A lot of times the buildings are placed so that just from a functionality perspective, so they want to make sure that there's enough room between buildings so they can get their vehicles and machinery in between in the spaces. If you try to shift the building closer to existing structures, you may not have that room to maneuver whatever equipment is required to allow for the farm use.
Do you have a follow-up, Director Martman? Okay, and I just checking with staff, is there any applicants that wish to speak on any of these applications? Or I'm going to call the question on this one if there's an applicant that wishes to add anything. Not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. I also see, Ms. Harrison, that alternate director McNeil has having issues. I'm not sure what we'd like to do with that. If we want to break until she can get back on. Director Morrison?
I think you had the right idea. Take 5 and see if we can get her back on.
Okay, so I'm gonna reset. Okay, so I think I caught alternate director McNeil's camera off when we did that vote, but it was a unanimous vote. Is there?
We are live, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on now to R4. Ms. Harrison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to admit the applicant from the lobby.
Oh, thank you.
And item R4 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ20CO2 for 3451 Cobble Hill Road, PID 0179967883. And there is a 2-part recommendation. Would you like me to read that for you, or would you like to hear from staff first?
I'll wait for staff on this one, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Limshu, if you're presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. So item R4 relates to application number RZ20CO2. The subject property is located at 3451 Cobble Hill Road, PID number 0179967883. So what you see in front of you is just a location map to show location of property in relation to the neighborhood: Cobble Hill Road, Fisher Road, Garland Avenue. And this is just an aerial of the plan. The purpose of the report is to present an application to amend the South Cowichan zoning bylaw to permit a cannabis retail store as a site-specific use on the subject property located at 3451 Cobble Hill Road. So the long and short of it is there's an existing building. The applicant is wishing to use a portion of the building for cannabis retail. In order to do so, he does require an amendment to zoning to allow for cannabis retail. So the applicant, Warmland Cannabis, is a tenant of the existing building and has applied for the rezoning to include the site-specific use for cannabis retail in that location. The property is currently zoned C5. And while the C5 zone does allow for retail, the South Cowichan zoning bylaw prohibits cannabis retail stores in every zone except where the use is specifically permitted. And that's really what this application is all about, to allow for cannabis retail on that property. In October of 2019, the CVRD adopted the Cannabis Retail Store Application Policy. The policy states that cannabis retail stores will be permitted wherever retail is a principal permitted use. Now, staff are currently working on zoning bylaw amendments to include cannabis retail stores as a principal permitted use in several zones, including the zone for this subject property. As the process has not been completed, the applicant has decided to seek a site-specific zone to expedite the application. In the staff report, we've outlined that this particular application did go to the Advisory Planning Commission on October 28, 2020. Minutes are attached to the report. As well, the application has been referred to a number of agencies, which includes First Nation, Ministry of Transportation, Transit, the Volunteer Fire Department, and the various departments within the CVRD. So in reviewing the cannabis retail store policy, the policy outlines the criteria for reviewing retail store applications, the location where the application is being considered, as well as the building and siting requirements. The policy does not bind the board, nor does it, but it does provide a consistent framework to guide decisions on cannabis retail applications throughout the Valley. Within the staff report on page 4, there's a table attached, and within the policy, it identifies uses that should be considered within 300 meters of a proposed cannabis retail store site. So within the table, it identifies schools, parks, playgrounds, daycare, sports fields, community centers within 300 meters. And to the right of the table, it identifies the various existing parks, schools, and so forth that are within that 300-meter radius. The cannabis retail store application policy applies to all applications. The subject property, as I mentioned, is currently zone C5, which is a zone that may be recommended to be amended to include cannabis retail sales in the future as an outright permitted use. The other thing I should mention is that in conjunction with the application to rezone the property, the applicant has also made application to the province seeking license under the BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. We received confirmation that from the branch that an application for non-medical cannabis retail license has been made for the property. Now, as part of that process, the branch does require a public information meeting, and certainly should this application move forward, the applicant will be required to host such a meeting. The branch will not proceed with a license application unless local government submits a positive recommendation to the LCRB to support the issuance of the license. I guess the last thing I want to point out in this staff report is the issue around parking. Under the existing zoning, 26 parking stalls are required. Back in 1995, there was a variance granted to relax the parking from 25 to 22 spaces. The site plan that you see before you indicates the allocation and the location of the said parking spots. However, as noted in the staff report, the parking spots were not, there are no specs with respect to width and length of the proposed parking areas or parking spaces to confirm that they actually meet our parking bylaw requirements. The other point I want to make point out with respect to parking is that there have been some concerns raised, I guess within the last year or so, regarding parking on the site. And a lot of it pertains to the existing food truck located in this corner of the property. And the concerns are raised because the food truck has actually become quite popular. And so depending on the time of day, some of the folks that are participating and obtaining lunch or food from the truck, they are utilizing the site for parking, and some of that parking has actually spilled out into the road. Ministry of Transportation has been made aware of the concern, and I should note that the traffic engineers from the ministry did take a look at the intersection and concluded that there are no upgrades required at that point in time. Having said that, because this is a rezoning, the committee and the board ultimately may want to consider asking for a traffic impact study, just to take a more detailed look at the parking and the traffic movement in that particular location. In this particular site plan, the applicants have indicated that in order to accommodate the parking requirement for the retail store, 8 parking stalls are required under our bylaw. And the plan, it's not very clear, but it does indicate that there are 8 stalls or 8 spaces assigned to the proposed cannabis retail. So 6 along this location, 2 along this general location. The idea is that these spaces will be clearly identified for patrons of the cannabis retail. So with that, I think I'll stop there and take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much. If you could just remove the screen.
Sure.
And I can see my colleagues. And who do we have? Does the applicant wish to add anything at this time?
I don't think so. I just wanted to mention, I guess there was one last thing. Lauren Wright, who has been helping us through this process, she suggested that on all our parking spots, we have a 15 or 20 minute maximum sign to make sure people aren't parking there going to get food and lingering or whatever. So we will be doing that for all our parking spots. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you. I have a little bit of a speakers list. This is for staff. Go ahead, Director Acton, and then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just comment on those parking signs? I know in Chaudian Lake, we had different businesses do that. And, it creates a real negative energy, and it'd just be nicer that businesses kind of work together. That food truck has been the best thing that's ever happened to Cobble Hill, in my opinion. It literally has put them on the map. And I don't think the parking spaces are really an issue. So I guess I'm curious about I think it's more like, it's an in and out kind of stop for business anyway. We did have a cannabis shop in Chaudian Lake for about 2 years. And the part that I noticed that I hope is not true, I'm not, this is just my observant, that it didn't bring a lot of people to our village, because maybe things have changed now. It seemed to be, there were many opportunities for that use, that it didn't bring a lot of people to the village. So as an economic booster to the village, it wasn't big, but I hope that's not the case anymore. I guess I'm curious about the screening. There's always a screen on the shop, and is that, I just don't understand if that's necessary. Is that kind of a licensing from the applicant's side, or is that something that we require?
Mr. Limshu?
The screening is not something that we require per any of our bylaws. I suspect that it is a requirement under the branch to screen the store, and perhaps the applicant can clarify that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a extensive screening. I had to submit, I think, about 700 pages in total, tax returns for myself, corporation, investors, job history going back 20 years. I mean, they leave no stone unturned. So the screening couldn't be more thorough. And
so I meant the screening on the windows.
Oh,
like
yeah, we don't have any
walking or.
Yeah, we haven't screened the windows in Cobble Hill, and that location. There's actually it's an inner retail space, but then it's surrounded by an outer deck that's quite large, which isn't going to be open to the public. But because of that, no one's going to be able to see, any product inside or anything. And the province recently changed it so you don't have to frost the windows anymore as long as things aren't visible from the street. So we have no plans to frost anything unless we're asked to, but it looks like we shouldn't need to.
Follow up, Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's probably it. I guess I have another question, but I can wait my turn.
Okay, I have
to let it go around again. Thank you.
I just have Director Wilson. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, I was just going to move the recommendation. Can I do that now?
Go ahead.
I move the recommendation.
It's been moved and seconded. Director Acton, you have a follow-up?
Thank you. I guess I just was not clear about how important the setbacks are, and then why do we have them? I guess we've gotten those numbers from the licensing. So, because I feel like the community feels that there's these setbacks set up, well, then they would expect that it creates a zone, but in reality, it doesn't.
That's just a comment.
No, I guess it's a question, like how important are these setbacks, and is it pretty much like applying for a variance, or they're not strict setbacks, so I'm curious about it.
Go ahead, Mr. Limshu.
Director Acton is quite correct. The setbacks are included in a policy, and so those policies are meant to be used by the committee and the board to basically aid in evaluating the application. I mean, really, what it comes down to is that between the staff, the public, and ultimately the decision makers, one has to look at the context in which the retail store is being proposed and whether or not it's compatible with those surrounding uses. The setbacks are really a way of giving you a sort of food for second thought as to whether or not it's a good idea to have cannabis retail in close proximity to those various uses, i.e. the school, the park, and so forth.
Okay, thank you, Director Acton. Do you have a follow-up?
Just a last comment about the parking thing, because it has created a lot of tension in our village, and where some people were able to, Mr. Clay, your building has a lot of parking compared to the other businesses, and I think it's just great if people kind of work together on that and share as much of the parking as you can. And even looking at street parking, you might be surprised that there's probably a lot more parking than you realize. In Shawnee and Lake, we feel like we always have a parking issue, and we had consultants count how many parking spaces we have, and we have 350. But people will come to our village and actually not stop in the village because there's so many negative signs everywhere that they don't even know where to park. So instead of getting to that point, I think, work with your director, I know you had a merchants association. So good luck. And I would highly recommend not going that route if you can. Anyway,
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Director Acton. I have Director Markman. Go ahead, please.
So I'd like to speak to point 1 of the resolution, and that's around the referrals be accepted. I'm interested through the chair to staff about the referrals that from public health and also a referral from the closest nearest school to that. And is there a reason not to have them as a referral, or I'm not understanding why we wouldn't have those 2 important pieces?
Mr. Limshu?
So with respect to the referrals, I mean, basically, when we get the application, staff does make every attempt to ensure that the appropriate agencies are made aware of the application. And in some cases, it's not necessary to send a referral to certain folks. So, for example, with respect to Island Health, typically when we send a referral to Island Health, it's usually when in a situation where the site has got a private sewage system or water system, because they do have jurisdiction over those issues. Where the property is connected to community water, community sewer, it's generally less of an issue. So there isn't really a hard set answer, if you will. Basically, it's a lot of the times it's based on our experience in terms of dealing with specific applications, the scale of the application, the context in which the application is being proposed, and we forward those applications to who we feel are the appropriate agencies. Having said that, should the committee and the board feel that we've missed an agency, we can certainly send referrals out to those missing agencies.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Director Markman?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's informative. And since I'm new and I don't have the background, I tried to pull a little bit more information on this, and it seems that the 300 meters that was referred to may come from the VHA public health initiative or directive around cannabis stores or retail stores. And so if that's part of it, they also refer a lot to the impact on youth. And the location of it is, 300 meters was set as a very minimum, and 600 meters is a recommended distance from a retail store. So to me, I'm feeling that this is important information to have, but it also may be covered in the cannabis policy. So I'm not sure where it is. Just one follow-up question. I'm not sure who answers this, if that's okay. And that is passing this motion saying that we're okay with the setback being less than 300 meters? Is that what this motion is also intending to imply?
Mr. Limshu?
The motion that's on the table is basically allowing the applicant to move forward with a public information meeting to effectively solicit comments from the community at large. And so when you read the motion, it directs staff to come back with a follow-up report based on the information gathered through that public information meeting. And at that point in time, the committee can decide whether or not that's enough to move the application forward, or whether or not additional information is required.
Okay. I would like to go to Director Wilson and back to Director Acton. Go ahead, Director Wilson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of the questions which have come up have been asked before, especially about the setbacks. And I have to point out that in the village core itself, there is already a pub and a liquor store well within the 300 meters. There is also a general store which sells tobacco. So if we're going to draw the line at one, then we should be drawing the line at others. And I'd like to assure the director from Area B that full cooperation has taken place over the last few months, at least 18 months, with this director. So this application is no surprise to me. And to the comment that I should cooperate more is just a little bit, I think, on the surprising side, to say the least. But as far as I'm concerned, this application is a good one. There's nothing wrong with it. There was a retail store before which took up all 2 floors of the area. There was never, ever a parking problem there. And I don't expect there to be a parking problem with this one either. Thank you.
Director Acton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Wilson, I think you're putting words in my mouth. It wasn't directed at you. I was talking about how it causes negativity. Anyway, my question was, now I forget it. I guess around the public meeting, is there who sets the who sets the guidelines for that? Does the CVRD or the licensing bureau?
Yeah, with respect to the information meeting, it's following the guidelines of the licensing branch. So in this case, it's notices have to go out to property owners within 300 meters of the subject property. It's got to be advertised in the paper for that particular meeting. I guess the other part of this too. So that's in relation to the actual license itself. Bearing in mind that we're still having to go through the rezoning process as well. So the rezoning will actually trigger a public hearing. So the idea would be to get through the public information meeting, get feedback from the community at large. Staff will come back with a report and a recommendation, and the committee and the board can decide whether or not to advance the amendment bylaws to first and second reading and ultimately on to public hearing. So there'll be a number of opportunities sort of to kick the can, if you will, with respect to this application.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other hands up, Ms. Harrison, could you read the recommendation out for us, please? It has been moved and seconded.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation, as moved and seconded, is that it be recommended to the board that the referrals for zoning amendment bylaw for application number RZ20CO2 for 3451 Cobble Hill Road, PID 017996783 be accepted. Number 2, that following a public information meeting to be held by the applicant regarding the proposed retail cannabis license, staff report back to the Electoral Area Services Committee with recommendations regarding issuance of a license and proposed zoning bylaw amendments for application number RZ20CO2 for 3451 Cobble Hill Road, PID 017996783.
Thank you so much. I'm seeing no other hands up. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And alternate Director McNeil, you're okay?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so that has been carried. Thank you so much. Moving on now to R5.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Item R5 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ20D01 for 4715 Trans-Canada Highway, PID 005376289. And there is a 2-part recommendation before you. Would you like to hear from staff, or would you like me to
I'll
read?
hear from staff again on this one. There might be a few questions, but maybe not.
Thank you.
Mr. Limshoe. You're muted, or I don't know if you.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay.
I'm just going to share my screen.
You know, that is the word of the year. You're muted.
Alrighty, so item R5 relates to application number RZ20D01. The subject property is located at 4715 Trans-Canada Highway. The applicant is the same Warmland Cannabis, same as the previous item discussed on R4. The proposed rezoning application is the same in that the applicant is requesting a site-specific rezoning to accommodate cannabis retail on the subject lands. The proposed cannabis retail store would be located in an existing building on the subject property. So as you can see on the site plan, the area that's shaded in green on the plan to the right outlines the area within the building that the applicant would like to occupy. I guess the difference between this application and the last application is just the surrounding context, the surrounding neighborhood. Whereas the previous application was located in the village, this particular site is located along Trans-Canada Highway, more specifically along the Whipple Tree frontage road. As you can see in the staff report on page 4, we have a similar table that takes a look at the uses of concern within the 300 meter setback. So that would include schools, parks, playgrounds, daycare, sports fields, etc. And in the column to the right, you can see that the proposed location meets the 300 meter setback requirement. In respect to the cannabis retail store policy, that policy would apply to this site. The process that the applicant is going through for the earlier application is would be the same for this particular site. The proposed recommendation to the committee and ultimately to the board is to allow the applicant to move forward with a public information session with staff bringing back a subsequent report speaking to the data collected through that process and ultimately allowing the committee and the board to decide whether or not to advance the zoning amendment to first and second reading and ultimately public hearing. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Limshu. Are there any questions? Well, once you take your screen down, I'll see some hands. Are there any questions on this? I know that I do have questions. This happens to be in Area D, Whipple Tree. My question to staff is, I wouldn't want to hold up an owner of a business. My question is the actual property owner, and this is the third, I'm thinking, I go back a little ways, the third rezoning that has happened on this property. And the last one was a paintball, I believe, and it had netting and stuff in the back of the property, which I believe all of that infrastructure from the paintball is the field or whatever is still there. And I'd like to see the owner clear that up. First of all, not only for the look of it, but also for the netting with birds. We have a huge bird population and stuff. So I'm just wondering, that was one of my questions, as well as I'm doubling up here, and the road issuance. So this isn't the applicant necessarily. This is the owner of the property. So like the village of Cowichan Bay, a lot of the actual buildings are on the Ministry of Transportation. So is there a way that could be cleared up and be alleviated? Not to hold up this application, but to the owner of the property? Thank you.
Through to the chair and the committee, the quick answer is yes. I mean, this is a rezoning application, and certainly we can have discussions with the property owner. While they are not the applicant per se, it does affect their property. And certainly we can see commitments from the property owner to in this case, clean up the site, and certainly work with the Ministry of Transportation to obtain the appropriate permission In this case, would be an encroachment agreement for the building that is actually encroaching onto the highway right of way.
Thank you so much. I think it's an opportunity to have those things cleared up. Yes. So I'm looking to Director Morrison. Go ahead, please.
Move the recommendation, and if there's a seconder, I'll speak to it briefly.
There is a seconder. Go ahead, please.
I think that this makes sense. I hear the area or the chair's desire to see this move forward, and would entertain a subsequent resolution unless staff are clear on what the chair was after as far as additional discussions with the property owner. I'd support this fully, and would enter another motion if it's required, or if staff would just give us assurances that they'll follow up.
Mr. Limshu, does this need another resolution?
I mean, certainly I understand where the chair was coming from with the concerns raised. However, for certainty, perhaps it makes sense to have a resolution.
So would that be a follow-up resolution? We'll move this one. Okay. So it has been moved and seconded. I'm not seeing any other hands up for questions. I'm going to call it. Well, actually, Ms. Harrison, could you read the recommendation, please? I believe we hadn't had it read.
Yeah, we did.
No, we didn't. Thank you, Madam Chair. The recommendation before you is two parts. That it be recommended to the board. One, that the referrals for zoning amendment bylaw for application number RZ20 DO1 for 4715 Trans-Canada Highway, PID 005376289 be accepted. And number two, that following a public information meeting to be held by the applicant regarding the proposed retail cannabis license, staff report back to the Electoral Area Services Committee with recommendations concerning the issuance of a retail cannabis license and proposed zoning bylaw amendments for application number RZ20 DO1 for 4715 Trans-Canada Highway, PID 005376289.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of winging it here, but I sort of have something in writing. Would move that staff approach the property owners to discuss addressing right-of-way encroachments and wildlife hazards and unsightliness issues, and report back to committee.
How is that? Okay. So that has been moved. Is there a seconder for that? It's been seconded. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. Moving on now. Unfinished business. Ooh.
There is none, Madam Chair.
And there is no new business. We move on now to question period. Ms. Harrison, are there any questions for the chair?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Wow, this calls for a motion to adjourn. Been moved, seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Meeting has ended. Thank you very much.